Hi, this is Suzanne Desrocher-Romero, and I'm the founder and president of the George A. Romero Foundation, and you're listening to The Graveyard Show.
Welcome to The Graveyard.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I am your caretaker, and the graveyard is open. Well, this is one of those shows where I feel very honored, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. I just want to get the show business out of the way really quickly. If you are on Slasher and you want to follow the Graveyard Show podcast, you could do so. The handle is @Graveyard Show Podcast. @Graveyard Show Podcast is where you can find the show. And if you want to just do it the old-fashioned way and email me thoughts, suggestions, comments, criticisms, you can do so at the email address gyspodcast@gmail.com, gyspodcast@gmail.com. Well, I hope all of you have been having a nice summer so far. I have been. That's why I've been away for a while, just enjoying the summer as life is starting to reopen, thankfully. I am really honored to have the widow of George Romero on the program, Suzanne Romero. And it was one of those things where I just kind of, it just kind of started to snowball for me. The Amusement Park was on Shudder, and I watched it, and I knew I was going to love it, and I did. And all of you out there are loving it as well, so that's really awesome, and I'm really happy to hear and read that. If you follow this show at all, you know that George Romero, if you listen to the show, you know George Romero has always kind of been on the outskirts of this program. I interviewed Judith O'Dea, who played Barbara in the original Night of the Living Dead. You can find that. I believe that's Tombstone 11. And then I devoted 3 podcasts to Kim Paffenroth, who is the author of the book Gospel of the Living Dead. And at the time, it was about the 4 Romero zombie movies: Night, Day, Dawn, and Land. I know I didn't say them in order. Night, Dawn, Day, and Land is the proper order. There you go. So I did 3 podcasts on that as well. And one was about Kim and the book itself. And then I did one podcast on Night and Dawn. And then the third podcast was on Day and Land. So if you're a Romero fan and you're new to this program, go back and listen to those after you listen to this. And, you can see what a fan I am of his films. And it's not just because they're zombies. The zombie genre is not, it's good, but it's not why I like Romero's movies. When I was going to school and learning about filmmaking, I saw this movie called Night of the Living Dead, and it really stuck with me. And it became an influence on me. When I was taking film classes in school, I wrote a few papers, critical papers, one on Night of the Living Dead, one on Dawn of the Dead. And one script that I wound up writing and directing was very much influenced by Night of the Living Dead. So George Romero has kind of stuck with me. At least that film stuck with me very early on. And then as I grew to see his other movies, I understood why. He is not a horror director. He's a filmmaker. He can make any movie. And he is just, he can make any movie. So my dream was to have him on this program when I originally did the show back in 2009 and 10. And I made some attempts at the time, and then timing and everything else, it just didn't work out. And unfortunately, when I brought the show back, he had already passed away. So to be able to have Suzanne Romero on this program to talk about her late husband and his work is sort of a full circle for me with this program. And it really, when I reached out to the foundation and said, would anybody, or would Mrs. Romero be interested in talking about this movie? I got almost an instant reply of yes, and we put this together, and here we are. So for me, this might be the most personal of all the shows I've ever done. I just want to get to it, and I don't want to talk anymore. I've already talked too long as it is. So I'm not going to waste any time, my friends. As you hear in the background, a new grave is being added to this graveyard. And when that happens, that means my guest is here, and it's time for me to gratefully get to work. Well, joining me now is the widow of filmmaker George Romero and the founder and president of the George A. Romero Foundation, and I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Mrs. Suzanne Romero to the program. Mrs. Romero, it is a real honor and it's a real pleasure to have you on the program. Welcome.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you.
So there's so much to talk about. But let's start with the most obvious, the amusement park, which is obviously streaming right now on Shudder. Those of us who are fans of your late husband's work were so excited years ago when we heard the news about this mysterious lost film that was out there, that was discovered. And of course, my concern was, I hope we get to see this movie and that it just doesn't kind of go away. Thankfully, it was restored. Thankfully, it's streaming on Shudder. But what I read in an interview with you previously was that you were not aware of this film, The Amusement Park, until a few months before the passing of George Romero. Can you tell everybody the story about how you were first introduced to that film?
Sure. It was actually a few weeks before he passed,
okay.
Which was, a friend of ours, Julia Vagnola Valan, brought me the 16 millimeter print and a DVD, and it was like, okay, what's this? And so I showed it to George. He said, I did that in, 73. So I was like, okay, but how come you've never even mentioned it ever? And he was like, it was nothing. It was, it was a industrial, PSA, 3 days, no money, bing, bang, boom. So it was like, okay, well, let's slap it in. So we did. We watched it, and I have to tell you, it was 51 minutes of, oh my goodness, what is this? And again, he sloughed it off, and I have to say that it was, first of all, it had Romero footprint all over it. I mean, it oozed. And I kept seeing him, I kept hearing him, and then I saw that he had, a little cameo, and the subject matter is difficult, ugly, edgy. I just thought this film was incredible. And the fact that he just kind of just sloughed it off, it just amazed me. And so, time passes by, and I decided that I'm going to create or found the George A. Romero Foundation, and that this would be the first project that we would do. We'd get this thing restored, and we'd see if people were interested in seeing it. And let me tell you, people have been interested in seeing it.
Yes, they have been. Now, those that aren't familiar with the history behind how George Romero got involved making this movie, can you please explain to them how he was approached to make this movie?
Well, Carl Rabadek, who is the producer of this film, his wife at the time was, a volunteer at the Lutheran Senior Life, and they were looking for, to make a movie or make an industrial so that they could let their communities know about programs for the elderly and all of that. And they said, Carl, do you know anybody? And he went, yeah, well, actually, as a matter of fact, I know this guy, George Romero. And they went, okay, let's hire him. So they did. And, when you hire, Brian De Palma, you're going to get, a little violence. If you hire George Romero, you're going to get edgy.
Yes.
And they certainly got that, and I guess, they never actually said to me, we didn't really like it, it was too much, but you could tell that they kind of just put it away, because years and years later, when I went to look for another print, because mine was so bad, they didn't have a record of it being made. They didn't have a record of the donation that their organization did. They had no record of it. So they kind of just put it away. And so, I guess they just didn't find it effective for their needs.
That's amazing to me. I mean, and this is also now after he had already made, Night of the Living Dead. So,
yeah.
And that wasn't a movie that just kind of went away. I mean, people knew that movie. So I'm just kind of curious how they didn't connect the dots and go, hey, wait a minute.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, George never really, at the time, never imagined that he would be, this horror zombie guy. He did a film called Night of the Living Dead with friends, and he didn't think that he would be considered that guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So for him, he wanted to make movies. He wanted to make films. So for him, it wasn't really about what kind or what's, he just wanted to tell stories, and he wanted to have a camera doing it for him. So
I could see him thinking, oh, this zombie movie is just going to be one of many just movies that I make.
No, he just thought this was my first movie.
Yep.
At first it wasn't successful, but then it started growing in terms of popularity and impact. The Cahiers du Cinéma said this was, a masterpiece. So then suddenly people are starting to go, oh, who is this George Romero guy?
Mm-hmm.
But really at the time it was, kind of guerrilla filmmaking, and, and also, how lucky that he kind of hit a home run on the first effort. That hardly ever happens.
Yeah.
But it happened to him. But to be fair, he wasn't really in that box just yet.
Mm-hmm. What I find interesting is that I kind of want to go off the road here for a minute and kind of take this side road real fast. So if I'm not mistaken, he had done some page work or something on Alfred Hitchcock's movie North by Northwest. He was on the set.
Yeah.
He wasn't really impressed with the way Hitchcock directed, and he was more along the lines of Orson Welles was a filmmaker that he was
very impressed with Orson Welles, for sure. Yeah.
Which is interesting because I could see, after having heard about that, I could see George Romero directing Citizen Kane. I can see him making that movie. Because Magnificent Amberson, Citizen Kane, those are very interesting films when you see how they're shot. And when I look at George Romero's movies, I go, even it's they're horror movies, but it's more than that. If people really stop and pay attention to how he directed and put a story together, it's a clinic in filmmaking. It's really interesting. And when I heard that he was more of a fan of Welles, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense.
No, and he was a film. He loved film, and he would find even Hitch, there were qualities that he liked from Hitch. But I think that if you were going to ask, what filmmakers, really influence you, it wouldn't have been Hitch, but he liked Hitch. He just didn't think that, Orson was much, Ford, William Wyler, there were so many, he really loved Polanski. So when he looked at film, he looked at it from a different kind of a lens. When I see a film, I see it, let's see if it's going to entertain me. He doesn't look at it that way. He looked at it more from craft, from what did the director want to do, how did or she do it, that kind of a lens.
Yes, definitely. So, getting back to now the amusement park, in terms of the restoring the film, I believe there were 3 prints that you wound up coming across. The one you had, the one that the Lutheran Service Society had, and then I believe there was a third one that you came across. And they were all.
Lutheran never had. Lutheran never had a print.
Gotcha.
So I had a print. Tony Buba had a print. And a woman in Dallas had it in her archive. But when she took a look at it, she said, oh, my goodness, it's so pink, and it's so terrible.
Okay.
So we never even asked her if we could have the print because we knew right away. Now, Tony's wasn't wonderful either. It was scratched, warped, ripped, all that. Mine wasn't all that much better, but it was the best of the three. And so that was what Indie Collect used to restore it, and they did a great job. It was really crazy difficult because they didn't even have the elements; they just had the 16, and they did it, frame by frame.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
How
they really did a good job.
How long did the process take, roughly?
I'd say about a year. By the time first of all, I did some shopping around in New York to see who, could give me the best price to get it done because, we're a foundation and we always have a tin cup in our hand. Yep. And so, we're always short on funds. So anyway, I met Sandra Schulberg and her team, and never mind that her price was sort of in the middle of everything. She was just right up our alley. She's all about preserving old film, and she's just a wonderful restorer, and she's, and it's important to her that we save American film.
I agree. It's I know it's something too that Martin Scorsese is very involved with as well.
Sure.
And it's true. It's like, these movies, especially from the time period, made, with film and stuff that, we don't even use anymore, but it's like that's stuff that ages and decays, and you hate to see.
Right. It's a finite source, and so you really have to, and we just have to be aware that if we don't take care of them, they just just disintegrate.
Sure.
So we definitely need to have people aware. Of course, now everything's digital, and so so all of the films that have been filmed digitally will last forever.
Was when the restoration process began, was there a concern that maybe it wouldn't get done, that maybe the film was too damaged or the audio was too damaged?
Yeah, there was definitely concerns, and but they plowed through it, and they, they're brilliant at what they do, and the colorist was amazing. And of course I see the flaws. I see them. I still see the paint. I still see all of it, but, it's just that the technology they have today, after they scanned it initially, they just did, they have experts, and they have the technology, and they did the best they could, and it looks great.
And what I like is that it doesn't look perfect, because I don't think film should ever look perfect.
Right.
There should be flaws, and there should be little things in it that distinguish it from other mediums, and I think that's what always lured me to that particular art
There's
form.
nothing wrong with a little patina, but if the patina is so great that it distracts you from the actual story, or then that's a problem.
Yes.
So you have to make sure that when someone's looking at the film, that it's not front of mind, that they're able to see the film as it was intended, and not to be disturbed by gashes and floating dust and all the stuff that happens to old film.
Agreed. Yes. So when the film was fully restored, when and where was the first time that you saw the final product when it was completed?
Well, I saw it. I kept going every 3 or 4 months to the studio or to the lab and taking a look at the progress. So I had been seeing the film. But then finally, when we premiered it in Pittsburgh, I saw it for the first time on a big screen. And I remember George saying to others, especially in interviews, saying, the director often never sees the film big. It's always on the Avid. It's always, we always see the movie small. So it's when it's released do we actually see the film in a big format. So yeah, I saw it at the premiere, and it was very well received. I was worried about it, though, I have to say, because I knew right from the pop that cinephiles would enjoy this film. I knew Romero completists would enjoy this film. But I wasn't sure, and I say air quotes, the fan would enjoy it, because it's not really part of his oeuvre in the zombie or horror gore fest. This is completely different, and I wasn't sure if they would receive it. But I think they have, for the most part.
I think it's been incredibly well received. I think I hear what you're saying, because it does touch both the cinephile and the Romero fan. And then, of course, there's all points in between. I think most people, especially reading stuff on Shudder. Now, again, it's a horror site, but there is a very specific taste that if people like a movie, they will tell you. If they don't like it on there, they will tell you.
Right,
and
sure.
Across the board, it is just solid ratings, high ratings. People love it. They're like, even some people are like, I didn't know what to expect. This isn't normally like a movie that I would watch. This is great. And I have to tell you, it is just fantastic, and I'm so happy to see it getting the kind of reviews that it should be getting, because it is a real horror movie.
It is horror because it's real life.
Yes,
it's a look at real life, and also a quote that George used. People used to ask him, what kind of horror films do you like? What scares you, Mr. Romero? Mm-hmm. And he'd say, what? It's life that scares me. Certain unnamed presidents scare me, So, so this film is a reflection, again, a huge, social commentary on George's part. I also have to say, now that I've seen this film, I wouldn't say a million times, I'm being hyperbolic, but, I've seen it at least 25 times. And I have to say, it's probably the most Romero film of the bunch. It's just the way it's cut, the way he makes you feel uncomfortable with the way he's edited the film, the way he, it's ugly in bits, and the white room and the metaphors, and I just think it's probably the most Romero of all the Romero films.
You know what? I have to agree with you. It really is. And you see the blueprint for a lot of the future films he would make in terms of, the opening, like the opening to this film reminds me of the opening sort of Dawn and Day of the Dead, where you have the character who's in a room, and after this traumatic event or traumatic moments that they've been living through. And it's very interesting. There was one scene in particular that I had to go back and watch a few times, and it's the one where Lionel's on the train, and he's taking the train around the amusement park, and when he gets on it, he sits in front of this elderly couple, and he just waves them. It's very quick, very, if you're not paying attention, you're really not going to read it. And then as they're going through, death appears behind the couple and then goes away. And then the train stops. Lionel gets off. You don't see the elderly couple. They're not even there. And then you see the woman, the elderly woman, is sitting now on the crate, which you're now assuming is holding the casket to her husband who passed away. Yeah. And it's one of those moments where I'm like, wait a minute, is that the same woman that was just sitting behind him when it's talk about commentary and metaphors and it's all right there, but if you're not paying attention, you're not gonna catch it. Yeah. It's just so well done.
It's a good observation, because it really is, and like I said, it was 3 days.
That's amazing.
And I have the script. The script is barely there. It's maybe 2-3 pages.
Wow.
So it's all him. It's all him. Just we're making it work, and it's just, to me, it's just a testimony of his craft. And every time he made a film, he said, I learned, about making advancements. I would never make the same mistakes twice, you know. I see a film, I see Don, I go, oh my God, he said, you know, I see all the mistakes that I did, but then, you know, then they got better. And every time he made a film, he got better. And because when you're an artist, you're always striving to improve your craft. I think people are losing that sense, you know. When you see films today, there's not that much craft going on, you know?
No, it's sort of the conveyor belt, right? It's just like, get the product out, get the product out, get the product out.
Yeah.
There is a huge difference. Speaking of getting the product out, once the amusement park was restored, was the plan to get it onto Shudder to stream, or was that just one of the people that approached you and said, hey, we'd like to have this on our platform?
Well, we did some shopping around to see if anybody was interested. Some people said no thanks. Some people said let's see. And, you know, so I met with Sam Zimmerman in New York, and right away he was interested in having the film stream. But, you know, we needed to do sort of all our chain of title work that we needed to do before selling it. So we engaged our agents at Yellow Veil Pictures, and they literally helped me get this film out there because it was a 48-year-old film. You know, no one kept records. You know, there was no record of anything, so it was really hard to get all the you know, the logistics done for selling a film. But we finally did. I had great lawyers and the agents. We just all worked together to see if we could get this film sorted, and we finally did. So that was the hard part. You know, of course, getting it restored was Indie Collect's hard part, but for me, that was the easy. You know, I'd come in every 2-3 months and say, oh, yeah, I like it, or can we fix this? But the hard part for me was chain of title. That wasn't so easy.
Well, I know all of us as horror fans are thrilled that Shudder picked it up. It made the most sense for them to do this. And, you know, I mean, as we said, the reviews are just going crazy bonkers. People are loving it.
We're actually certified fresh.
Yeah, well, as it should be.
I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know it was a thing, you know, but I got a call from, you know, Justin at Yellow Veil saying, oh my God, Suze, we're certified fresh. And I'm like, okay, what is that? And apparently we get like a tomato trophy. And I thought, oh my goodness.
That's awesome.
So it's sort of like a good housekeeping seal of approval for films.
There you go.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. That it's all, I mean, I'm sure too, for you, it must, you know, I can't imagine the wave of great emotions that are going through you as this movie's, you know, getting more and more popular. I mean, it's just got to feel incredible.
Well, it's gotten more attention than Bruiser did, or, you know, Night Riders did.
Yes.
You know, so it's really astonishing to me that this little 51-minuter is getting a lot of attention. And I think it's also a timing thing because the artist has passed, so now we're okay, let's see this piece of work. And then there's the pandemic that shone a light on our shameful way we handle our elderly.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a layered reason, I think, why this film has gotten the attention it has.
And I think, too, it opens up eyes to people who were not really thinking about that, you know? I know, like, for myself and my wife, we've lost our parents. We've had to take care of our parents, and we've watched them, you know, age and get sick, and it's hard. And watching this movie, it brings back some of those emotions where you're just like, man, you know, and you go, why is our society not better towards people as they age? It's almost like it reverts the other way. It's like, get out of here, your time is up, you're useless. And it's just like, if anything, it should be the exact opposite. It's like we should be learning from them and taking care of them and appreciating them. And it's like, and it's just not that way for the most part.
It isn't. And, and some, like you and your wife took care of your aging family or your parents. But a lot of these folks in this film don't have that either. Mm-hmm. So not only do they not have the familial support, they don't have money. And so then now they're relying on society to support them. And we fail. We fail dismally. And so I'm hoping that this film causes dialogue, having the conversations, especially from young people who see this film. Because at the end, I would think that Shudder's demographic is generally young. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that this kind of film says, okay, wow, never thought about it.
Yeah.
And really, when you think about, are there any films out there in any era about this subject? And I don't know. Can you think of any?
Not off the top of my head, I couldn't. No.
Yeah, I don't think there are any.
No.
So this is a very sort of novel subject, and it's still relevant today, unfortunately. And so I'm hoping conversations will be had.
Now, are there any plans for this film to be released either on a Blu-ray format or on a digital format?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not quite sure on the timing of it.
Okay.
But yes, eventually people will be able to get a DVD or a Blu-ray or whatever format.
Great.
Also because I do know that a lot of Romero fans and just, fans who really like a filmmaker really like to have the whole collection,
Yes.
And so I think that people will be interested. And also, not everybody streams, so the people who don't stream will be able to eventually get their hands on this DVD.
Yeah, and I think really at the end of the day, this is going to be one of his most popular films easily. I think
so.
Yeah,
it's
I really
funny,
do.
But yeah, I think so. And if George were alive, he'd be like really astonished. Like he would really be nodding his head going, I don't get it. But yeah.
Well, I think because it's real.
It's real. And it's almost pseudo-documentary, Pseudo-documentary meets, Pressburger,
Mm-hmm.
and, it's just a different style of sort of filmmaking. And I have stills of the set, and so I know what George was wearing during the 3 days, and I can see his outfit going across the camera. And if you listen to the Walla, it's all George Romero. So, it was a one-man show.
Wow.
He had all the peeps were volunteers, and Heinzman and Mike Gornick, they of course were there and helped, but George just had a vision of how it needed to be, and he had 3 days to do it.
And it's like we said, it's just a fantastic film. And if you haven't seen it and you're listening to this, you need to go see it immediately.
For sure.
Moving on to the George A. Romero Foundation. Now, this is something that you created to keep his legacy alive, thankfully. At one point did you decide to do it, and how much work went into creating this foundation?
Well, I have to tell you a story. When George was diagnosed with lung cancer, he immediately said to me, I don't want to talk about business. No more business. I went, okay, no problem. I completely understood. And George and I played a lot of games. We played, Clue and Monopoly and Scrabble and, all the games. And I'm playing Scrabble, which was our number one game, I say. And we were playing Scrabble, and I asked him very casually what he thought his legacy would be. And he said that he really didn't think anybody really cared. And it really blew me away when he said it. And I didn't say anything to him at the time. I just kept playing, and those words kept rolling in my head. Nobody really cares. And so he passes, and I'm roaming the halls in my apartment, our apartment, and I kept hearing those words. Nobody really cares. Nobody really cares. And I thought, it's just not true. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the horror world. I'm just not built that way. But I knew what he said was wrong. And so every single day I work to prove him wrong. That's what I do. I prove him wrong every single day. And so, it takes time to establish a 501c3. So got the paperwork done. It was actually pretty quick. 2-3 months after we filed, we got it. And I started to accumulate or procure a team, and which I'm so thankful for, because they're all so smart, and they are, in fact, fans of the horror world. And of course, I'm learning every single day about the world, George's work, because of course I knew his work, but not really in depth, if you know what I mean. I knew it in a surface way, and so now I'm really getting to know his work, and his career, and so other than proving him wrong on that, I'm also trying to get him out of that box that he was put in. So I'm unboxing him in a sense, because, we have an archive of all of his works. There's 45, 50 unproduced screenplays, treatments, da-da-da. Those are not zombie movies. These are just stories. And, he wanted to tell stories, and he wanted to make these movies, and everybody kept saying, no, George, it's not a zombie movie. So, he was frustrated as an artist that he kept being put in this box. And yet, he was grateful, because it's hard to make a career these days. It's hard to do well. And so he was grateful for the career that he had. But it was bittersweet, because I think, he would have liked it to have been more diverse, more substantive, and people wouldn't have any of it. They just wanted him to do zombies.
Yeah,
so,
it's like that box that we all get put in. It's like, oh, this is who I see you as. This is who I see.
Right.
And it's like, whether it's in life or at a job, and it's, I'm sure it was incredibly frustrating, because it's like, look, I'm not going to sit here and make zombie movies every year. I want to make other movies, and his other movies were so solid. That's the sad part for me. I mean, to hear him say that nobody really cares just broke my heart, because it's like, being a fan,
it breaks your heart.
Well, it does, because I mean, Night of the Living Dead, and I don't say this because it's a zombie movie. It's, if anything, his movies, Night and Dawn and Day, what they did for me was, they did one thing that a lot of horror movies can't do. You wait for the monster to show up, and in those movies you didn't have to, because the movies and the characters are so compelling and the stories are so interesting that the characters on the screen and the humanity that was being shown, or lack thereof, in these movies was what kept your interest. And he told these stories. And I likened him to Stephen King. That's why I found it so ironic that the two would eventually work together, is because George Romero and Stephen King could both make these quote-unquote horror movies that, if you took the horror element out of it, you still had a story there, whether it was a drama, a comedy, or any of that. And that's what I find so brilliant about both of them, is that, it's like Salem's Lot. If you took the vampires out of Salem's Lot, you'd have one really messed up community anyway. And the same thing with Night of the Living Dead. You have all these social issues going on in Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of Dead, obviously, with the consumerism, and Day with the military and science, and you have all these stories, and it's like, to me, that's what separates him from so many of the quote-unquote horror filmmakers, is because he's not making a horror movie, he's telling a story that just happens to be horror.
And the monsters are us.
Exactly.
And that's frightening. And, you know, and he, towards the end, you know, when he was thinking about, you know, how does this end? You know, he loved zombies. He thought they were superheroes. You know, they were dumb and sort of automated in their desires, but you know, he had sympathy for them. It was the human beings around the zombies that were the monsters. And yeah, so you know, so as a president and founder of the GARF, the GARF, it's, for me, it's, you know, making sure that people understand that he was an American filmmaker. He was diverse, substantive, and smart. And we're also wanting to elevate the horror genre, because again, the genre is considered B, you know, second class. I'm tired of it. I just think it's bull crap, you know. With horror movies or horror stories, you know, the Gothics, the Greeks, we've been, you know, doing this for a very, very long time, but somehow Hollywood has deemed it second. And I just need to feel that we are going to raise it up, and raise up George, and put cameras in little people's hands and tell them to make a story. And, you know, I'm interested in short films, and we want to do an international film contest. I'm interested to see what a Norwegian thinks is scary, or versus a Korean, versus, you know, a person who shoots it in Guyana. You know, let's see what you come up with. I'm fascinated by it, and we're hoping to do good work, and we do. And as I said before, we always have a tin cup in our hands. So, as all foundations, you know, everyone struggles.
Well, speaking of which, yeah,
money.
How if people want to find, is it just online, or is there a physical building that people can go to, or?
Well, there's the archive at the University of Pittsburgh, but we are looking to endow or fund a horror study center. We have a working group right now, but it's actually more or less, well, much more than less, virtual. It's all virtual. And now they're starting to get together. But we've got folks from all over the world, scholars, who get together and discuss the whys and wherefores, and why we get the goosebumps when we see these films. And I'm so excited that scholars are now studying Romero and his works. And so, you know, it's all knitted together, and we're excited. And we're only 3 years old, right? So
that's amazing.
So it's we're very young.
The future is bright. Yeah, exactly.
We're small potatoes who want to be big potatoes.
And if people want to go to the website, it's George A Romero Foundation.org, I believe is the great. So George A Romero.
And we're on Instagram and Twitter and all the social media platforms. You know, we do it all. So we also have our GARF network. We have interviews and panels and all that stuff. So we're excited, and we're about to start with getting women in horror, and we're going to have a show on shows with that in our heads. And so we're excited.
That's
excited
great.
About it.
That sounds fantastic. And again, if people want to go visit the site, it's georgearomerofoundation.org, which you should definitely go and check it out.
Sign up to our newsletter, and check out what we're doing, what our plans are, and check us out.
Great. Hey, quickly, I read an interesting story that you were telling about. You were talking with with George about your favorite zombie movie he did and the least favorite zombie movie that he did.
Uh-oh.
and I have to say, the answer was so refreshing. I have to tell you, because obviously when people say what's your favorite Romero zombie movies, they'll say Night or Dawn are usually the top two. But which one is your favorite?
What's of the zombie film?
Yes.
Yeah, I would have to say either Survival or, well, I have three: Survival, Day, and Night. Okay. And Day is I think my favorite, but Survival is very close. Okay. And Night still rocks it. So yeah.
And then your least favorite?
You're going to make me say it, aren't you? I always get in trouble.
Oh, you're not going to get in trouble here, because I just want people to understand that, movies are subjective, and I love this answer because I think it's so refreshing.
Well, it's Dawn of the Dead. Oh my God.
No, that's okay. That's all good. We're all friends here.
Okay. Well, listen, about 4 or 5 months, my new boyfriend says to me, well, I think you ought to see my movies. So I went, okay. So he procured all the films, and it took him a couple of weeks, but finally he had them all, and we sat down on the couch. And how lucky was I to have a Romero Film Festival with Maestro right next to me. And so we see the movies, and he's, seemingly interested in my opinion, and obviously knowing that I'm not, the demographic. But, and then when I told him that I didn't love Dawn, he just looked at me like, you're the only person on the planet who doesn't like this film. And I'm like, I'm sorry, George, but I kind of find it's kind of cheesy, so he, okay, well, yeah, right, you're the only one. So I know that I'm in the definite minority.
I love that answer, and I love that you told him that. That is so great. And the fact that he was just like, wow, you're the one.
Yeah, you're it,
Which is
you're
great.
my girlfriend. How is that craziness?
I love that.
Yeah.
That was when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this is just great. I love that.
His favorite movie was Martin.
Yes.
And I love Martin too. I mean, Martin is so interesting, and so that's another thing too that I got out of this film festival, was that I realized that this is no ordinary horror guy. I mean, it was obvious to me that it was so layered. Yeah. It was both cerebral and visceral. So if you wanted just to get the gore hits and the, get all of that sort of excitement, you were able to. But if you also were looking for, the more substantive part of the film, you were also satisfied because it was all there, Yes.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. I think that's for me when I saw Day. I mean, I was young when I saw it, and I was like, oh, okay.
It's so good.
And I didn't like it, and I was like, why don't I like this movie? And then I kind of went away for a couple of years, and then came back and watched it. I'm like, wow, this movie's a lot better than I thought it was. And now good. I'm like, and whenever it's on, I'm like, I'm there. But it was interesting. My first response was like, no. Now I'm like, I love Day.
Well, everybody wanted him to make Dawn over and over and over and over again, So he'd say, listen, I made Dawn, I'm not going to make it again. So that's it. And when I saw Day, I thought Bub was the best zombie ever. And I found him fascinating. I just thought it's dark, but it's good. I much prefer it to Dawn, but
Yep.
Like I said.
Well, I was
get in trouble for it.
well, I was thrilled when I was watching the last season of Stranger Things, and they did a whole reference to Day. The kids sneak into the movie theater, and Day of the Dead's playing. I'm like, oh, perfect.
Yeah.
I'm like, there you go.
And I love Laurie Cardell. She's a wonderful character, and it's just a good movie.
So, speaking of the zombie series, so the word is out that Twilight of the Dead is there's a script for it. Now,
yeah.
I remember way back when I was a young lad in film school, back in 90, somewhere in there, I remember hearing about this mysterious Twilight of the Dead film, and that it was going to be at that time the fourth and final zombie movie, and then nothing happened, and then Land came out later, much later. But so regarding Twilight, is this something it's going to happen, right? I mean, the wheels are turning on this thing.
I don't know. I have to say, I don't know. I want something to happen, but I have to also be extremely careful that it's done right. It's done with the right team.
Mm-hmm.
I am prepared to keep it in the drawer, forever if I don't get what I want, in a sense that, because listen, ideally it would be obviously great if it was George Romero who directed this last of the chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for us all, that can't happen. So it's a difficult position for me, because I need it to be absolutely wonderful, but at the end also I need the director to fly the way he or she will. So it's a difficult task to get somebody to direct this film, knowing that it's George Romero's last chapter.
Yeah.
It's a difficult task, and I am prepared to hold on to it. I will not sell my soul for this film. I will always protect it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's nothing until it's something. But I did want the world to know that it existed, though. Like, I did want people to know that the last chapter is there. And it's important that they know that it exists. But I also think that the fans are with me and support the fact that I'm going to be very careful with this. So
I know. I know. I'm right there with you. And I think I could speak for a lot of fans saying, you know what, we appreciate that, because it would be real easy to just go, here's the script, go make it. And,
Yeah, I get bought off. I get a producer credit, who cares, big deal.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's trash, it's garbage. And I will have sold out Romero, and it never in a million years is that going to happen. So for me, it's just sitting there. And and when Paolo Zalotti and Joe Netter wrote this script, it was dark. It's a dark piece for sure, obviously, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, boys, give me some light, give me something.
Mm-hmm.
So they did, because it was so dark that I thought, who's going to want to sit in a theater for 2 hours or an hour and a half and just, so they gave me a little light, but it's definitely a dark piece. It's George's treatment, his story. He noodled it for bunches of times. He'd keep coming back to it, and but they, of course, finished it like Dan Krause did The Living Dead, the book. Same thing. George, had worked on it intermittently for years, and when somebody passes, all this work is still there, right? So you need to see if somebody can knit something together to let people know or have them exposed to some of the last pieces of work that George did.
Well, I appreciate you spending time here on the show to talk about your late husband and to talk about the foundation and your work. This really meant a lot to me when you agreed to do this, so I cannot thank you enough.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, and I will definitely get the word out on anything that comes out regarding Twilight, and of course, for everybody listening, again, it's the George A Romero Foundation.org is where you can go. Mrs. Romero, thank you so much for spending time here on the program.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. My pleasure. My pleasure.
As I put this interview to rest, there are very few times on this program where I've been really kind of speechless. I think I am right now. This really meant a lot to me that Mrs. Romero did this interview for me. Like so many of you out there that are fans of the great filmmaker, George Romero, and he was a great filmmaker. Anytime we can get more information on the man and his work, it's just fantastic. And to have his widow here to spend this time to talk about it, really is just incredible. And I greatly appreciate Suzanne Romero for taking the time to do this. I'm blown away. But I'm also really sad when I heard her say that George said no one really cares about his legacy, and that had a real impact on me during that interview. It still kind of does, to think that someone who was so talented and who did so much for the genre as well as for those of us that were aspiring filmmakers, for him to think that no one cared, it just hurts. I don't know. And I'm so thankful that Mrs. Romero is out there keeping his legacy alive, and it's alive not only through the foundation, it's alive through every one of us that have been influenced by him in some way or another. And even when you have people like Tom Savini that are out there still working and doing things, and you see interviews with all the different actors and actresses that have been in his movies, it's just, it's one of those things where it's so easy to forget the past, and it's so easy for us to discard history. And it's one of those things that just, if there's something that really kind of just irks me, it's that. Because history is the foundation of the future. And George Romero, in this case, as a filmmaker and as a contributor to the horror genre, is a major part of that foundation. And I've been fortunate enough for most of my life to have him making movies. The only movie that he made before I was born was Night of the Living Dead, and that was barely before I was born. So to have this man making these movies in my lifetime, I feel very honored, just as I'm honored to have had Mrs. Romero on the program as well. I'm going to just wrap it up there, my friends. So there you have it. Again, if you want to get in touch with me through Slasher, the show is available at the handle @Graveyard Show Podcast is where you can find me. I'm going to kind of digest all of this, because this is as I mentioned at the top, this is just a lifelong thing for me with George Romero and the association with this show. So I'm going to go take a breath. I'm going to calm myself and just kind of absorb this. And I'm very thankful for this interview and this show. And I want to thank all of you out there for listening. And if you want to send in thoughts, comments, suggestions, you can also reach me at the email address gyspodcast@gmail.com, gyspodcast@gmail.com. Of course, you can find the Graveyard Show Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, everywhere podcasts exist. And you have the YouTube channel, Graveyard Show Podcast. You know what? Go out and celebrate George Romero. Go watch any of his movies. You can start with the Amusement Park on Shudder if you have it. If you don't have Shudder, you know what? Night of the Living Dead you can find, of course. Martin Season of the Witch, all his movies now, Night Riders, they're all available now. So go find them. Shout TV has Night Riders, and it's free, I believe. So you can go watch it there if you've never seen it before. All right, my friends, enjoy your summer. We will reconvene in July. And as you exit the graveyard, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Thank you, George.